Lu Yin's spacecraft had originally been able to travel to the Fennel Flow Zone via the giant tributary arc, but now the giant tributary arc had been sealed off. No one was allowed to enter the Fennel Flow Zone, and similarly no one was allowed to leave the Fennel Flow Zone. This was a method used by the Interverse's various major flow zones, led by the Sword Sect, to resist the Great Eastern Alliance. They wanted to completely seal off the Blazing Mist Flow Zone and the Fennel Flow Zone and prevent the Great Eastern Alliance from traveling to the surrounding flow zones. Lu Yin watched as the spacecraft in front of him returned with a calm expression. Shui Chuanxiao appeared behind him. It seems like your situation isn't good. It's not a good thing for you to be placed against the entire Interverse. Lu Yin replied, there's no other way. I've already tried my best. He then looked at Shui Chuanxiao. Have you thought it through? Are you willing to become the commander of the Great Eastern Alliance? Shui Chuanxiao looked at Lu Yin with interest. You're inviting me because of Enya? Of course not. Enya can't make decisions for the Great Eastern Alliance. She asked me to save you and I've already done that. Inviting you to become the commander is my own idea, Lu Yin said. Shui Chuanxiao was puzzled. Aren't you afraid that my identity will be exposed and bring you trouble? Lu Yin turned around and looked into the distance. I already have a lot of trouble. Compared to the help that you can provide, this little bit of trouble is still something that I can deal with. Shui Chuanxiao nodded. Alright, I have nothing to do anyway. Besides, I can't leave the army. Lu Yin smiled at Shui Chuanxiao. Welcome, Commander. I should be calling you Alliance Leader now. What's the current situation in the Interverse like? Lu Yin answered, of the 8 major flow zones, the Blazing Mist Flow Zone, Chaos Flow Zone, and Day-Night Flow Zone all belong to me. The first Flow Zone, Beast Tamer's Flow Zone, and Spirit Seal Flow Zone are all clear enemies. The Erudite Flow Zone is secretly helping the first Flow Zone and the others, while the Gu Flow Zone is staying out of this. However, that's only for now. Shui Chuanxiao was shocked. You control Chaos Flow Zone as well? The second Night King had been brought out by Lu Yin, and he knew that Lu Yin definitely controlled Day-Night Flow Zone. However, he had never expected that Lu Yin would control Chaos Flow Zone as well. This meant that Lu Yin controlled almost half of the Interverse, and the smaller flow zones were nothing to worry about. Lu Yin smiled. If I couldn't do that, then I wouldn't have the guts to make an enemy out of the entire Interverse. Shui Chuanxiao solemnly asked, Lu Huang's existence is enough to make the Sword Sect hesitate and even turn against you. How did the Alliance leader make the Wen family so afraid? I control the Wen family's most important inheritance, Lu Yin answered. Shui Chuanxiao sighed. I should have a good chat with the Alliance leader. I know too little about the Great Eastern Alliance and about you. Up ahead, a spacecraft approached, intending to chase Lu Yin away. Besieging Pine Flow Zone was the first mission that Lu Yin had given to Shui Chuanxiao, and it was also his first mission as commander. Over the next 2 days, Shui Chuanxiao had given Lu Yin a plan to besiege Pine Flow Zone. Truthfully, Lu Yin had thought that Shui Chuanxiao was an expert in military affairs, but after reading through the plan he found that Shui Chuanxiao's ideas coincided with Wang Wen's. Furthermore, Shui Chuanxiao's military arrangements for besieging Pine Flow Zone were even better than Wang Wen's. Using a small flow zone to seal off Fennel Flow Zone as an excuse to mobilize the Allied forces. This is exactly the same excuse as yours. Lu Yin smiled. Wang Wen replied, Commander, you've completed all of my work. Not only that, but he's also completed Wei Rong's work. Lu Yin looked at Shui Chuanxiao as he explained the military arrangements. Wang Wen frowned. He could have completely surrounded Pine Flow Zone without letting anyone escape, but he left a few loopholes that correspond to Gu Flow Zone, Spirit Seal Flow Zone, and possibly the First Flow Zone. He's making preparations to unify the Interverse. It seems like the older, the wiser. Just wait. He's using his own methods to infiltrate Lu Xinjun into Pine Flow Zone. This process will take at least a month, and I'll go into seclusion during this month. During this time, Lu Yin paused for a moment before continuing, I'll keep a low profile. Those who were familiar with Lu Yin knew that he would always keep a low profile before causing a huge ruckus. The quieter the Great Eastern Alliance was, the more likely it was that something big would happen. Lu Yin left everyone's line of sight and entered seclusion. He had gone into seclusion because he had too much money. After Blazing Mist Flow Zone was conquered, the resources of the Ross Empire and the Sylvan Dragons would all be his. With the Blaze Realm as an example, Lu Yin did not have much hope for the Ross Empire and the Sylvan Dragons. He did not think that they would have much money. The more powerful a power was, the more money they would spend and there would not be much left. The Blaze realm was the most obvious example. However, the Ross Empire had given him a small surprise, and the Sylvan Dragons had given him an even bigger surprise. The Ross Empire only had 700 million star essence, which was definitely not a lot, but it was still much more than what the Blaze realm had, which was quite good. As for the Sylvan Dragons, Lu Yin was truly stunned. Legend had it that some creatures liked to collect shiny objects. Lu Yin did not know if the Sylvan Dragon clan was like that, but he knew that he had struck it rich. The Sylvan Dragon clan had a total of 3.5 billion star essence in their possession. What kind of concept was this? 3.5 billion was actually more than Chaos Flowzone's Chaos God Mountain. It was simply ridiculous. When Lu Yin had received the star essence, he had almost thought that there had been a mistake in the number and that a decimal point had been missing, but the truth was that there were 3.5 billion star essence. He had asked the upper echelons of the Sylvan Dragons, but he had learned that they did not know what to do with star essence and that they had no other use for it aside from cultivation. The Sylvan Dragon's cultivation speed was far slower than Lu Yin's, and their consumption of star essence could not compare to the amount they obtained. Humans would use money to create pleasures in life, trade, and even give gifts, but the Sylvan Dragons did not. They only knew how to store things. Even though the Sylvan Dragons only occupied a third of Blazing Mist Flow Zone, they had only taken in and not taken out for countless years, so they had obtained an enormous amount of resources. If not for the Sixth Mainland's invasion, which had stolen most of the resources, Lu Yin would have obtained much more than 3.5 billion star essence. Humph, that woman should be the most beautiful person on this planet. How many times have you toyed with her? Aha, junior sister, don't talk nonsense. I don't understand you. English? Alright, let's go. Are you guys done yet? Someone in the distance urged. The man listened to their conversation and was then taken away. However, no one paid any attention to him. Bringing him along was more like bringing along an animal. They dragged him away directly. The man also witnessed the strength of the Red Moon Empire. Those endless zombies and the terrifying corpse kings couldn't even withstand a single blow. After following them for a few days, other than the man, many other people were rescued by them. They were all extraordinary people, but they ignored the ordinary people and allowed them to be bitten by the zombies. They even jokingly made bets on how long they could live. The young girl with the delicate face was the same. They did not treat ordinary people as humans at all. The strangest thing was that these people did not kill the corpse kings. They let any corpse kings that they encountered go. This filled the man with doubts, but he did not dare to ask. Over the past few days, he gradually understood the origins of these people, and he also understood the position of the planet that he had been born on in the universe. The planet that he had been born on was called Planet Anxio, and it was located in the Basin Flow Zone. He did not know what a flow zone was, but he knew that the Crimson Moon Empire was the master of the entire Basin Flow Zone. Every once in a while, they would cause an apocalypse on a planet to select extraordinary people to join the Crimson Moon Empire and become their soldiers. Their planet was the chosen one. After learning about this, the man's eyes were filled with hatred. The Crimson Moon Empire had deliberately caused an apocalypse in order to select soldiers. They did not care about the lives of the ordinary people on the planet, especially when the young girl had said, "If we can obtain cultivators with extraordinary innate gifts, sacrificing 100 planets like this is worth it." This sentence would appear in the man's dreams every day. That young girl's delicate face was filled with malevolence, and he swore that if he had the chance, he would destroy the Crimson Moon Empire and take revenge for his hometown, his parents, and his unborn child. He hid his hatred deep in his heart. On this day, the man followed the cultivators from the Crimson Moon Empire to a huge spacecraft. "We're finally here. Get on the spacecraft. The moment you get on, your fate will change," someone said loudly. Someone asked in a low voice, "Then what about our hometown?" The cultivators from the Crimson Moon Empire sneered. "Hometown? This planet? It's going to be destroyed soon and will never exist." The man and all the others who had been rescued felt their hearts sink. They remained silent and quietly boarded the spacecraft. Not long after, the spacecraft flew into space. Welcome aboard. Stay tuned and subscribe to Han Li's Wuxia Adventures for more thrilling content. Chapter 1707. When he thought of this, Shigu immediately contacted the council. He wanted to use this as evidence to accuse Lu Yin of abusing his position to avenge a personal grudge. He had intentionally released the Corpse King so that he could use the expeditionary army to take revenge on his enemies. However, this proposal was rejected before the council could even make it to the council. For the Hall of Honor, the most important thing right now was to eliminate the Corpse King. This was not just for the Hall of Honor but also for the entire human race. Eliminating the Corpse King had always been the Hall of Honor's goal, and nothing else was important. Even if Lu Yin had intentionally released the Corpse King, his contribution in destroying the Neo-Human Alliance's Innerverse headquarters was still real. No one could afford to offend him at this time. Even the South Wellspring Council's director, Mr. Wright, and the others who were hostile to Lu Yin did not want to cause trouble at this time. This was not looking for trouble, it was looking for trouble. Shigu did not want to become Lu Yin's sword, but he had to follow the list that Lu Yin had given him. Otherwise, even if Lu Yin did not cause trouble for him, the entire Hall of Honor would. Shigu could only sullenly follow the list. As for the smaller flow zones, they could only count themselves unlucky. Regardless of whether there was a Corpse King or not, the expeditionary army would still go through them. During this time, the Blazing Mist flow zone's tributary ship was sealed off. No, everyone would be inspected, including the tributary ship. This was just a small lesson that Lu Yin had given to the smaller flow zones. Coupled with the Crimson Moon Empire's and Seal Pavilion sect's fates, Lu Yin believed that after this battle, no small flow zone would dare to take the lead and help the Sword sect resist the Great Eastern Alliance. It would be too easy for Lu Yin to deal with them. In outer space, Lu Yin quietly stood there, waiting for something. Not long after, his gadget rang. Lu Yin glanced at it and accepted the call. "Video? Where did you get this?" An old voice asked. It was Elder Chan, and Lu Yin passed the video to him. "I accidentally discovered it. That Corpse King did not notice that it was being filmed." "Well, saw it?" "No, I sent it to you after I saw it." Elder Chan was silent for a moment. The Genesis Court should not have cooperated with the Neo-Human Alliance. "Why?" Lu Yin asked. Elder Chan did not answer. Instead he said, "Don't give the video to anyone else. Destroy it." Lu Yin said, "Elder Chan, if you know about the Cosmic Tree, then you must know about the Eternals." Elder Chan quietly and did not seem surprised. The Eternals are humanity's greatest enemies. Even Progenitor Chin and Progenitor's era. Since we know their whereabouts, why don't we cant to the Genesis? Elder Chan sighed. The technocracy is very special. If you want to enter, you have to force your way in. The Eternal Sky Island's disciple assessment is to force your way into the technocracy. You should know that once you force your way in, how will you be able to find out if the Genesis Court is working with the Neo-Human Alliance? That would alert the enemy, but if we don't force our way in, we won't be able to enter. "I have a way in," Lu Yin said. Elder Chan was surprised. "What method?" "The Luo Emperor is the ruler of the Ross Empire, and he's from the technocracy. He knows that there's a route between Ironborn City and the Genesis Court that allows one to enter and exit the technocracy. I've already locked him up in Kuan's swamp, and as long as we bring him along, we'll be able to enter the technocracy." "All right, I'll make the arrangements." Elder Chan was excited, as he had never thought that Lu Yin would actually be able to find a way to enter the technocracy. "I don't know. The Sixth Mainland shouldn't have directly sent anyone to interfere," the chief of Boundary Mountain said. Lu Yin looked up. "That's unlikely. If I were the Sixth Mainland, I wouldn't have given up on the technocracy. A unified technocracy is enough to threaten my Fifth Mainland. If it wasn't just First City that attacked the Outerverse, but also the Genesis Court, then the Outerverse wouldn't have been able to hold on. With the Sixth Mainland's attitude towards my Fifth Mainland, they wouldn't have shown any mercy." "That's strange." The chief of Boundary Mountain was curious as well. Lu Yin guessed that it had something to do with the Cosmic Tree or the Wang family. First City was backed by the Sixth Mainland, while the Genesis Court was backed by the Wang family. Wang Yun had represented the technocracy in the Astral Combat Academy's Tournament of the Strongest, while Wang Yi had represented the technocracy in the Sovereign Tournament. They had both passed through the Genesis Court, and Wang Shang had also entered the technocracy through the Genesis Court in order to hunt down Lu Yin. The Genesis Court was backed by the Wang family, which was the main reason why Lu Yin had come to the technocracy. First City was very clear, but the Genesis Court was very murky. However, the Fifth Mainland was more willing to trust the Genesis Court, as the Genesis Court had never been too hostile towards the human domain. Lu Yin and the others quietly passed through the Southern Weave and they all relaxed. It was best not to attract the Sixth Mainland's attention. They weren't confident that they could escape from the Daosaur sect's 4 sovereigns, and the Daosaur sect definitely had hidden powerhouses. A new year has arrived. I wish my brothers all the best. Thank you for your support. Thank you, brothers, for your support. Thank you. Lu competition existed everywhere, and the technocracy was no exception. The human domain was filled with internal strife, but the technocracy was more open. This was something only the technocracy could do, as they were all controlled by a single mainframe. The human domain could never do such a thing. Many dominant consciousnesses like to stay inside their own cyborgs. Alliance Master, take a look. There are 14 avatars on the screen, and there are 2 at the top. One of them has been famous for 1,000 years in Eben City, and he's very powerful. He's called the Transcendent, and he's led a team to participate in more than 10 remodeling competitions, winning the championship twice. The other one is called Little Leo, and he's a genius inventor who rose to prominence recently. He's also leading a team, and this is his first time participating in a remodeling competition. He's already reached the finals and his prospects are very good. Little Leo? Lu Yin's eyes flashed. Wasn't that the person who had given Banjio the blueprints for the cyborgs? They really were fated to meet. How do you know all this? Lu Yin was puzzled. The Luo Emperor had been away from the technocracy for so many years, so he shouldn't know much. The Luo Emperor took out a personal gadget and handed it to Lu Yin. This was given to me by the cyborgs. Everyone has one, so you can learn more about the technocracy. Before coming here, Lu Yin and the others had stored their gadgets in their cosmic rings to prevent the technocracy from investigating their information. He looked at the information on the gadgets and sure enough, there was a detailed description of the teams participating in the remodeling competition. There were a total of 100 research teams participating in the competition, but only 2 had reached the semi-finals. The Transcendent teams mainly researched weapons, and while the cyborgs weren't particularly outstanding, they were allowed to use weapons in battle. As long as they won, they would be considered unscrupulous in the technocracy. The Transcendent team's weapons were very powerful, and Lu Yin looked through them. The weapons displayed so far were very strange, and he couldn't understand the principles behind them at all. Little Leo's team focused on cyborgs and didn't have any weapons. Lu Yin understood that Little Leo's cyborgs were being researched by the Great Yu Empire. As long as the materials were good enough, the cyborgs could be upgraded endlessly. Lu Yin hadn't dared to think about it in the past, but after returning from the cosmic tree, he had thought about it. Little Leo's cyborgs might be able to create emissary-level cyborgs as long as the materials were sufficient. In this remodeling competition, the winning team will be qualified to form an army and participate in the war against the Genesis Court, the Luo Emperor said in surprise. Lu Yin hadn't made up his mind yet, but when he heard the Luo Emperor's words, he immediately looked over. Little Leo looked at the pile of materials in front of him, but he wasn't surprised. To these androids, these materials were the same as human star essence. This amount of materials wasn't even enough to create a few androids. But soon Little Leo was at a loss and then lost. Cyrite Lightfang wood. What's this? Ancient sandstorm? Little Leo looked at the rare materials and called out their names one by one. Most of the materials he saw came from the Ross Empire's fort, and they were stored together with the star essence. They must have been collected by the Luo sovereign to create the envoys. Their uses were exactly the same as Little Leo's, so it was easy to distinguish them. Little Leo picked out more than 10 materials and his breathing quickened. He turned to look at Lu Yin with an excited expression. You're really willing to give these materials to me? Lu Yin nodded and smiled. There's a saying in the human world, friends don't bicker. Take them. Little Leo's eyes twinkled as he pondered. After a few breaths he stepped forward and hugged Lu Yin. Friends? We're friends. Lu Yin smiled. Friends? Achi, you're Little Leo's friend and I'm Little Leo's friend as well, Little Leo said excitedly. Lu Yin suddenly felt a tinge of guilt. Even though he still didn't quite understand these dominant consciousnesses, it seemed that they didn't have the concept of friends. However, they also didn't have the same cold emotions as the Corpse King. These androids could have complex emotions, but they just didn't know how to trigger them. It was like living in a world where there were no lies. They were honest with each other, but they were also very cold. With these materials, are you confident in winning? Lu Yin asked. Little Leo scratched his head. It'll be difficult, but it's much better than before. It's a pity that you don't have the main material to upgrade the central source control. Otherwise you'd definitely win. Lu Yin knew about the central source control, as the core of little Leo's androids that could be upgraded was the central source control. Lu Yin raised his hand and took out the Genesis Dazzling Stone. What about this? He didn't know if the Genesis Dazzling Stone was useful, but it definitely wasn't simple if it had been passed down by the frigid immortal sect. Little Leo looked at the stone and was shocked. What's this? He hurriedly took it and examined it. Genesis Dazzling Stone? It should be an ancient material that went extinct a long time ago. How can there still be one? Lu Yin replied, I accidentally found a crack in an ancient sect and picked it up. Little Leo was envious. You humans are so lucky. What did this have to do with being lucky? How about this? Is it useful? Lu Yin asked. Little Leo replied, I'm not sure, but I'll give it a try. There's still more than a month before the competition, so there should be enough time. He then looked at Lu Yin. 7. I'm going back to prepare to upgrade the androids. Do you want to come along? Lu Yin shook his head. Forget it, I won't be going. See you in a month. Lu Yin did not understand. He had relied on the Stonewall scriptures to activate the 9 Cauldrons battle technique, and it was impossible that he was the only one who knew the Stonewall scriptures. Since Driftcharge Planet's Elder had been able to memorize it, it meant that there were others who knew it as well. Lu Yin did not believe that none of the progenitors from the 9 mountains and 8 seas knew it, but why couldn't he activate the 9 Cauldrons battle technique? Aside from reciting the Stonewall scriptures, what else had Lu Yin done that was special? He could not figure it out. The 9 Cauldrons invincible battle technique, huh? Show it to me. The chief looked at Lu Yin with sparkling eyes, and he was filled with anticipation. Lu Yin raised his hand, and his star energy condensed into a blazing sun. Cauldron aura poured into it. 1 sun, 2 suns, 3 suns, and finally 4 blazing suns revolved around his palm. Lu Yin stepped into the first divine gate alone and arrived at the budding terrace to wait for the chief seat of World Mountain. Very quickly the first seat of Jia Mountain arrived. Brat, since I came in with you, will I be leaving with you as well? The chief suddenly asked. Lu Yin was stunned, as he had forgotten that the length of time one spent in the Daosor sect's ruins depended on one's spiritual force, and it was not fixed. He would be able to leave after a month, but that might not be the case for the chief seat of World Mountain. Senior, your spiritual force shouldn't be that strong, right? Lu Yin asked expectantly as he nervously looked at the chief. The chief thought for a moment before replying, I'm not good at spiritual force. Lu Yin relaxed. But it's more than enough to destroy you, brat, the chief said. Lu Yin's heart sank as it was over. He had forgotten about that. It was easy to enter but difficult to leave. With the chief's strength, it would be normal for him to stay here for a few months. Could it be that he would have to stay in a city for a few months? Then what was the point of coming here? It would have been better if he had not come in at all, as that would have been a waste of time. The second Night King and Emperor Lu were currently at the Ross Empire's stronghold. If Lu Yin did not return for a long time, who knew what would happen? The second Night King should be fine as he was afraid of the sealed cage technique, but Emperor Lu might not be, as those two were different from the flying willow leaves. Lu Yin was helpless as he had already entered, and he could only take things one step at a time. He still held on to some hope, as he had been able to stay here for about a month when he was still far inferior to the 10 arbiters. After returning from the astral tree domain, his spiritual force had greatly increased, and he could still stay here for that long. Perhaps he could only stay in the Daosor sect's ruins for a little more than a month? Lu Yin could only console himself like this. For the sake of the 9 Cauldrons battle technique, Lu Yin quickly brought the chief over. Along the way he introduced the budding terrace, Heaven's Pit, Medicine God's Palace, the library, the Beginner's Enlightenment platform and other places. Lu Yin warned, Senior, these are the ruins of the Daosor sect, and even progenitors have been slaughtered here. The reason why the 6th mainland's older powerhouses do not enter is because they want to leave their opportunities to the younger generation, but also because accidents can easily occur here. Senior, it's best if you don't explore carelessly. The chief gritted his teeth. Why didn't you say that before we came in? Lu Yin pursed his lips. I forgot. Brat, you're very cunning. It's no wonder that you were able to unify the Outerverse, the chief said hatefully, but he did not argue with Lu Yin. That was how cultivators were. If they only cared about others, what was the point of cultivating? That kind of character would have died many times over. Jia Shan's chief acknowledged his request and walked towards the 5th cauldron. He looked at it for a while before entering it, as he also wanted to see if he could learn anything from it. The 9 cauldron space was not a place that ordinary cultivators could enter. Those who were qualified to enter had already done so, and the rest had no intention of going. Lu Yin absorbed the cauldron's aura, and soon more than half a month had passed. There was a rumble as the fourth cauldron fell and shattered. Jie Shan's chief stared at the shattered fourth cauldron in shock. He had personally witnessed the shattering of the 9 cauldrons, which had been passed down since ancient times. Although the cauldrons were small, they had caused a great shock. The shattering of the fourth cauldron startled Ancestor Eyeless awake. Ancestor Eyeless stood up with an aghast expression. The cauldron shattered. Lu, he had only said one word when he was knocked unconscious by Jie Shan's chief. How troublesome. You didn't control your strength enough. Be more careful next time. Lu Yin looked at the shattered fourth cauldron and then turned around to look behind him. There were still 5 cauldrons left. His figure flashed and he appeared within the 5th cauldron. Time was not up yet, so he continued. Jie Shan's chief did not speak to Lu Yin. Instead, he lowered his head and picked up a fragment of the cauldron. He squeezed it hard, causing it to shatter even more. He was shocked. How could it be so brittle? Over the past half a month, he had tried to shatter the 5th cauldron, but he had not been able to do so. However, now that the cauldron had shattered, it was actually very brittle. Could it be that after shattering, some substance had disappeared? He looked at the 5th cauldron thoughtfully. This brat should be absorbing that substance. It wasn't just Jie Shan's chief, even the 6th mainland had thought of this possibility. However, they could not absorb it, as the substance that prevented them from destroying the cauldron was too attractive. Soon, a few more days passed, and a youth stepped into the 9 cauldron space with an arrogant expression. He was a newly promoted realmling, and all realmlings were allowed to enter the 9 cauldron space in search of opportunities. This was the first time he had stepped into the 9 cauldron space after becoming a realmling, and he was filled with anticipation and excitement. He was also filled with a desire to learn the 9 cauldrons' battle techniques. After entering, he fainted before he could even see anything clearly. Thank you for your support, brothers.